Caroline, you've had a chance. Caroline, you've had a chance to do that. Naomi, I'm not sure if you wanted a chance to test your mic.
And hello, Tom, and hello, Penny.
Okay. All right. So if anyone needs to check that their mic is working, feel free. In terms of, just if you haven't been in the session before, there should be a microphone icon down the bottom that you can mute and unmute. In between, if you're not speaking, if you can just keep that muted, that way we don't get too much feedback. That would be great. The text chat is on the right-hand side. If you can't see it, it could be that the panel is closed. There should be a little arrow icon in the bottom right corner, depending on how your browser is set up. It's generally a little purple icon in the bottom corner, and that will expand and collapse the panel for the chat. So feel free to add questions around the chat while people are speaking, and maybe save any questions on the mic until the end of people's presentations. In terms of, and we're already recording, aren't we, by the look of it?
Yes, I just pressed the record button. Can you hear me, by the way?
Excellent.
Oh, great.
Okay, so maybe I'll just introduce the session today then, while we're all ready. So today we have Ariel Kelly, who's the Academic Manager from New Zealand Tertiary College, speaking about increasing digital literacy for staff and students. Carolyn Ondrechek, who's the Senior Coordinator for Curricular Services in the Library at La Trobe University. She's going to be talking about the new La Trobe University Digital Literacies Framework, and Dr. Naomi Barnes, who is a postdoctoral adjunct and senior research assistant at Griffith Institute for Educational Research, and she'll be presenting a talk regarding reconceptualizing digital spaces to build staff digital capacity. So they sound terrific. So welcome, guys. Our session today is all about digital capacity, digital literacy, particularly around staff. Obviously that then, to some degree also affects students, but we're mostly targeting staff capacity today, which is something that I'm sure is quite pertinent to most of us in a tell and support kind of role, in terms of how do we assist staff in gaining skills, and how do we navigate those spaces in terms of ensuring that staff are confident in using technologies for teaching and learning. So, so in terms of starting the session off, if Ariel, you're ready to get going, Ariel's first up. So Ariel's the Academic Manager at New Zealand Tertiary College. Her background is in staff development, using technology to support teaching and learning and educational leadership. She's a fellow of the New Zealand Association for Educational Administration and Leadership, and a winner of a New Zealand National Tertiary Teaching Excellence Award. Her research interests include learning technology, online communities, and the New Zealand e-learning guidelines, and she's been teaching online for over 15 years. So I'll just check that your presentation's up, Ariel, but if you wanted to introduce yourself, hopefully I've done a good job of introducing you already, but feel free to take it away.
I'm not entirely sure Ariel's here. I don't see her on the list. And given that Naomi's...
Ariel, are you here? Yeah, I can't actually see her on the participants panel either.
Perhaps maybe we'll switch in. Yeah, if Caroline, if you wanted to start, yeah. After I've done that big introduction for Ariel.
I didn't want to
Sorry about that. So Caroline, I'll just bring up your presentation. Would you like me to introduce you, or are you?
Oh, okay. I can introduce myself quickly. I hope everyone can hear me okay, and there's not too much background noise, and I'll try to keep my paper shuffling to an absolute minimum. Okay, great, thank you. So my name's Caroline Ondracek, and I'm the Senior Coordinator Curricular Services in the library, as you can read there. I've been a bit involved in the reference group and part of the work that we're around the digital literacies framework at La Trobe. So I do work in the library, so I guess I'm coming from a library point of view. It has been a university-wide project to date. Now I'll just send the link through to the framework so that you can have a look if you would like while I'm speaking. So let's go to the next page. Whoops, gone too far. Okay, so why have a framework and what's it all about? As you can read there, we think it's a really critical framework, and it's important for the university because it sets out a high level, at a high level what the attitudes, capabilities and understandings that students and staff need to be ready for a digital future. So you can see that we've got like the icon there, our graphic, and you can have it, I don't know if you can see it okay, but you can see it a bit clearer in the framework, the link that I sent you. Okay. So what are digital literacies? We've used the GISC definition of digital literacies. You might be familiar with it and you might not be. You can see there it has 6 elements. So in the middle we've got ICT proficiency, and outside encompassing all the digital literacies we have digital identity and wellbeing, and in there we have smaller elements: information, data and media literacies, digital curation, communication tools, and digital learning and self-development. So I actually did consult with Helen Beetham at the end of 2015 about using the GISC definition, and she was a consultant that we worked with in developing the first consultation draft. So we feel that it's critical, as I mentioned before, to prepare students for an increasingly digital future. So it's critical for the university, for learning and teaching requirements, as well as for our researchers and our researching at the university. And it also helps us to provide a high quality online learning environment. So just to give you some background about the framework, we've had the digital learning strategy at the university from 2015 to 2017. So the digital literacies framework supports that strategy. There's the link below at the bottom of my slide as well. So we're focused really around those 3 sort of focus areas, I guess: digital attitudes, capabilities, and self-development and learning. Okay. So I guess from a library perspective, we were using our information literacy policy, procedure and framework, and we realised that while that's a useful document, there was more of a trend and a focus on information literacy in a digital world, and then digital literacies, when we thought about find them, it's actually like a larger conversation that is a bit outside of just the skill set that we would normally practice in the library. So it's a bit more than just information literacy, and it's a bit more than just ICT skills, etc. So from a library point of view, it was a good opportunity to start thinking about digital literacies. We could also see there was a lot of trend, well, at a few universities in Australia as well as in the UK. So it's a good opportunity to move forward. So our aspirations in 2017 is to, well, to have a roadmap for the framework and to include elements of digital literacy into staff development, and then also into student outcomes. Also have staff and students really engaged in a digital environment, and to also have all of our systems, physical, virtual, cultural, the environment at the university, all supporting our digital innovation. Just to give you some more background on the project and the development of how it's been quite a number of years' work, as you've probably already guessed. So in 2015, the university librarian sponsored and led the project, and we have a reference group which has included a lot of different staffers across the university. We've had people from research, we've had members from Kate's team, we've had other key stakeholders around the university that have been part of the reference group. So at the end of 15, we were developing a consultation draft. Into 16, we ran some focus groups with our reference group, and we also before that, we did an audit and analysis of staff confidence, engagement and attitudes to digital technologies. So we did have a survey, we had other stakeholder workshops and focus groups. And as I mentioned, we had the reference group as well. So then I guess might have been mid last year that we had the consultation draft. So then we also got feedback on the consultation draft. We have included those changes into the latest version, which I sent you. So it has gone through some university approval processes and is now live on our website. We've also been invited to participate in the digital literacy tracker, which has just recently closed. So we just invited us to the digital literacy, to be involved in the digital literacy tracker. Now, it's like a survey, I guess. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. I've gone to another slide. I think I've put my slides in the wrong order. Oh, sorry. It's the first time I've ever used Collaborate, I'm embarrassed to say. We were one of 6 university libraries in Australia that were asked to participate in the tracker. We identified some subjects in first year at the university. Now, not all of those are health sciences, so there's an error in my slide, I apologise. We did have some 228 responses from surveys that we sent out in those subjects. Now, some of those subjects are very large cohorts, and it was 18 multiple choice questions. It took students about 15 minutes. We didn't have much of a choice in terms of the timing of the tracker, but was a good opportunity as a first starting point after the framework has been approved by the university to do a little bit more, to get a little bit more data about what level students were at the moment, especially coming into first year university. That would really help us in mapping out a roadmap and for steps moving forward in terms of how we're going to implement the digital literacy framework, especially in the undergraduate years. So I'll just go back a little bit, and basically now we would like to use that data, as I mentioned, to move forward with the framework. It's a good opportunity for the library staff in the team that I work in, which are the learning and teaching librarians. So we support the library learning and teaching requirements of the academics. So it's a good opportunity for us to be involved, perhaps in undergraduate subjects where we can help to implement digital literacies. Obviously, we would be working with other groups in the university to be able to do that. So definitely educational designers and developers, and we have our academics department as well, that we would all be working together to help implement the framework. So we were grateful that we have been involved in the digital literacy tracker. So just to it would allow the tracker results, we hope, will enable us to benchmark across other institutions, and we hope that the data will be able to give us an understanding of student needs and experiences of technology and online learning, and their knowledge and access to digital tools, activities, etc. We have some preliminary data, and I'll go into that in a minute. I just also, sorry about this, I'm just going to go into the data now actually and talk about our early analysis. Now, the tracker closed on the 31st of March, and early April we should, well, now we should be able to get some of the data. So we've been able to get some information which you can see on the screen there, which is exciting. So I will, I won't go into it too much because I think I'm running over time. I just wanted to also talk about a couple of other things that we are doing that are sort of related to the digital literacy framework. I guess they're tools that we could use to help skill up students and help skill up staff with digital literacy. So 2015-2016, La Trobe was involved in a pilot with Smart Sparrow, and they produce adaptive technology lessons. So we also worked with James Cook University to create 3 lessons, and you can see the names of those on my screen at the moment. One's information literacy, one's media literacy, and one's your digital identity. So last year we converted model, which is your digital identity, to a new La Trobe open access module, which is what you can see on screen. It's called Social Media and Your Digital Identity. So it's a little tool that we could perhaps, well, we have been able to actually embed in 2 subjects so far. It's also very general, so any students in any discipline could get into that module and go through it. So it's a fantastic module. So it just shows, we ask students to sort of analyse their social media use and just makes them aware of personal and academic social media sphere and their digital identity. So feel free to have a look at that. I can send the link around as well in the message. So we've also been involved in the ETextbook Bureau, which is an open access e-textbook platform. We have 3 full text textbooks on there. So we just, I just wanted to point those projects out because we think that they, we can definitely use those in implementing the digital literacy framework. They're just examples of how La Trobe is moving into a more digital future. So I would also like, you know, a lot of our textbooks are in print, but as learning is become, you know, all our subjects are becoming more blended as well as online, and it's good to have open educational resources as well, which showcase La Trobe's teaching. So just very last slide. Now I'm happy to take questions if I'm not running over time.
Thanks, Caroline. Caroline, maybe we'll have a couple quick questions if
sure.
Just because yeah, I'm conscious of time. So does anybody have any? No, that's all right. If anybody has any questions, jump in now.
Hi, Caroline and everyone. Thank you very much, Caroline. That was a really good presentation, and it's evident that you,
sorry, I stumbled on
the module, have done a lot of work around this. My question is around actually teaching that learning outcome of digital literacy to students. And I noticed that you had course frameworks for academics and students. And I want to see if you have more feedback from academics' point of view. So teaching students about digital literacy is one, but to do that, academics need to be themselves skilled up to understand that and then teach that as the learning outcomes. So have you had a lot of feedback and sort of evaluation around that?
We've had a lot of feedback from the consultation draft. So there's definitely, I guess, instances where we're already teaching to students particular digital literacies. The academic might be really up to date with how to use a particular piece of technology. They've stepped the students through it, and the students then at the end of semester can use that technology for communication or something like that. So there are instances where you know, academics are already on board themselves. I guess we definitely would need to make sure that our academic teaching staff are up to speed if they're going to use a particular tool, or they would like to teach particular digital literacy. Yeah, so we haven't had like, we haven't really been able to go ahead and roadmap with anything yet. We know that there are instances where digital literacies are being practiced and taught. So does that answer your question? I know it doesn't really, but...
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you. And then I think Tom is asking a similar kind of question. Staff preferred to have formal EdTech qualifications to teach, I suppose, literacies?
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Are students required, Tom's questions, students required to undertake digital literacy? At the moment, no. So at the moment, digital literacies aren't a graduate capability. So there's no particular capability attached to digital literacies, but obviously in the capabilities that we have, they do tie into digital literacies, the way we've put the framework together. And we don't have formal educational qualifications for staff either.
But maybe we can have a conversation about that a bit further at the end, about, I guess, opportunities and things that exist across institutions around formal and informal qualifications. So I'm just conscious of time and that Naomi might need to go. So, but certainly that's something that we could have a more of a conversation about towards the end. So that would be great to keep that moving at the end of the session. Thank you so much, Caroline. That was great to hear about the framework, both for staff and students. And Naomi, if you're ready to go, I'll just bring your presentation up. And can everybody thank Caroline in the meantime?
Much for your time, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Great. So I've just loaded up, Naomi, your presentation. So Naomi Barnes, Dr. Naomi Barnes is postdoctoral adjunct, senior research assistant at Griffith Institute for Educational Research, and she's discussing reconceptualizing digital spaces to build staff digital capacity. Take it away, Naomi.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yep, because I tested it. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm a what I suppose people would call a digital sociologist. So what I do is I look at the relationship. I don't just look at how to learn about digital literacy, how to be digitally literate. I look at the relationship between people in digital spaces. So I look at how people interact on social media, and it's not just that, but it's also, and in social and digital spaces, but it's also about how people interact with the actual digital tool itself. So it's like the sociology of how me and this and my smartphone, or me and Collaborate, or me and Twitter interact together and have a form of a relationship. So what I wanted to talk about today is Yeah, I suppose, Peter, a little bit like online body language, but also sort of like also effective relationships between us and our devices. So I think about how much, say students actually use their devices to, yeah, like students use their devices to actually become part of a university. So their devices are actually part of the toolkit that they use in order to move into university spaces. And so I look at the relationship between those things. So am I able to change the, yes, lots to do with digital identity. So am I able to change the slides? I'm sorry, I haven't seen Collaborate.
Yes, sorry, I'll just,
Oh, that's okay.
no, I'll just promote you. So, okay, you should have little
Okay,
left and right arrows now.
Yeah. Thank you. So basically, what I want you to do is just pick a digital tool that you feel like you know really well. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an example of what the sorts of things I do when I teach digital literacy. And that is, I actually teach not how to, I teach the relationship between the tools. And that I'll sort of take you through how I do that and how I think about these things when we are through this thing. So I want you to think about a digital tool that you know well and think about why you like it, what it does for you, but I also want you to think about how it frightens others off. Like, for example, Twitter seems to be very frightening for a lot of people. And you need to, I ask my students to think about why they are frightened of it. So actually get into that sort of realm of thinking about the emotional relationship between them and the tools. So when we're specialists in educating people to enhance their digital capacity, we often forget that there's this massive chasm between what we see as quite natural to ourselves, but to others it actually is quite terrifying. And digital tools do different things for different people and for different reasons depending on their backgrounds and access to technology. So so before teaching someone to use a digital tool that I know quite well, it's actually, I try to assess my own relationship between that tool and myself in order to try and work out how I'm going to go about teaching it. So I like to use McLuhan's laws of media to refresh my memory before proceeding. And basically what you do with that is they've got oh no, lost sound. Is it me? Oh, I'm back now. Yeah, yeah, okay, excellent. All right, so excellent. Okay, so what I do is I have a look at how basically how the tool makes me feel nostalgic for things which have come from the past. So what's it actually connecting me to in the past? Because the reason we often use digital tools is because they're something nostalgic for us. A really, really good example of that is Facebook, in how a lot of people, yes, good old text chat, is in how Facebook, a lot of older people especially use it to keep in touch with their family and friends. So you'll often hear people saying things like, oh, I'm only on Facebook because I can keep in touch with my brothers and sisters who are living all over the world, and it's easier than writing hand letters. So it actually does something quite nostalgic for people. You also need to think about what it takes away from you. So when you start thinking about why people might not want to engage with a digital tool, or when you're trying to encourage them to do it, you need to think about what it's actually taking
no. Looks like Naomi just got booted. Ah, poor Naomi. I'll give it another quick minute. Feel free to add your questions while we wait and hope that Naomi comes back. Otherwise, maybe we'll switch to Oriel, but I'll give Naomi a minute or two just to get back into the room. Caroline, it looks like your mic still might be on as well. So yes, it could, I don't know, we usually don't have these issues. So maybe if you've got some questions, think about them now, put them in the text chat. That way we've got a few ready to go when towards the end. Terrific.
I'm back. Yeah, yeah, I'm back. So, so basically, I did a study with some academics a couple of years ago about about blogging and academia, and one of the pieces of information that we got as to why academics don't like blogging is they actually quite like the barrier between that the paywall gives them, that the journals give them, that the editors give them. So digital tools actually can eliminate that, something that makes people feel quite comfortable. And the other thing is how it might, so what would happen is actually think about the scariest thing that could happen with a digital tool. So we think about things like trolling and those sorts of things in order to, so we understand what sorts of things people might find difficult when they're when they're engaging with a digital tool. So can I have my slide power back, or do you thank you. All right, so basically what I like to do with digital literacy is I actually think of it in the terms of fluency. I like using the fluency metaphor and the idea of dialects. And I think it's really, we would all know here, I would have I like to use the word fluency. It has been used in the past, and I really like this as a metaphor because we all would know that there's no real such thing as a digital native. It doesn't actually work as a metaphor. But I like the idea of digital fluency because then we can extend the metaphor into things like dialects. So each digital tool has a different digital dialect, basically. And the more we practice in certain, so there's things which connect the tools, but all in all, there is a different type of dialect between each tool, and it's just about reconceptualizing the use of digital tools within this digital dialect type realm. Okay, so when you're trying to teach, and one of the things we have to understand when we're teaching somebody digital dialect is that it actually requires more juggling than even a spoken dialect. So what you're being asked to do, what a person's being asked to do is first they have to understand what the writing is about. I remember the first time I ever came across Twitter, I couldn't read a tweet because of all the hashtags in it. And it's about the hashtags that are in it. I don't really understand how to deal with Twitter because it doesn't read the way I'm used to it reading. And then there's certain oral languages, so people might write the way that they speak, so you might have GR8 rather than great. So there's oral language which needs to be overcome. There's the way things are visually represented. Sometimes they have audio. It's also about how you move your mouse around the space. So it's really easy to go from this Zachary Carter to the follow. So you can follow him quite easily because of how things move around the space, so that the gestures become important, where to find things on the page, how to represent yourselves, like Carolyn was talking about digital identity, like people have to think about that, and also about where the spatial representation is. Where are they going to keep it on their phone? Are they going to keep it on their laptops? Those sorts of things. So there's all these actual different parts that somebody has to juggle when they come to know a digital tool. So basically, I promised Beyonce. So basically, wanted to just have a look at an example of someone who is fluent in several different digital dialects. So basically, Beyonce Knowles and her team are not simply fluent in making music and dancing, as we all know. They're building a pop empire, and it has required digital fluency in several digital dialects. She's basically intersected herself with the cultural phenomenon of Black Lives Matter. She's established a lingo with I Slay. She's calling herself the new Bill Gates. And basically she is speaking and bringing into the mainstream intersexual feminism. And she's been doing this all through the ability to manipulate several digital dialects. So if we were going to take Beyonce, if we're going to take Beyonce and use Beyonce to help us teach digital, to increase staff capacity in digital literacy, this is how you might actually approach it, through this idea of the relationship between the machine and the person. So when you go to teach somebody digital literacy or digital fluency, how do you do it? So do you approach it as though you were telling, as though you're expecting them to be like Beyonce? Do you want them to be like Beyonce? Because while this is an attractive option, because it could involve millions and millions of dollars, it's not necessarily sustainable for somebody who's not invested in the idea to begin with. So it's not actually attractive. It might sound wonderful to be famous, but it isn't necessarily sustainable. So when you're teaching, are you using real life examples of how the tools work? How the tools work to begin to increase staff capacity. So you're linking their usefulness to showing them how they can be used. So basically, you say, so it's kind of like what I would call in teacher education a pedagogy of digital literacy. Are you saying to them, because look what Beyonce can do with them, that means you could do with them this way? And as we have, as Tom said, not everybody wants to be Beyonce. No, not everybody is attracted to the idea of being Beyonce. And so therefore that's not necessarily a sustainable approach to teaching digital literacy either. I know it's hard to believe, but it is true. So what I would say is that when you going into teaching digital literacy or digital fluency, it's about going in with an attitude of talking to them about, talking to people about how they can use the technology to enhance what they are passionate about. So how can the digital tool fade into the background and their passion come into the foreground? And that, I believe, is the approach where we're going to get most success and understanding and fluency, and people prepared to continue to try to use the tools and develop digital fluency. And so basically that's all I had to say. And are there any questions?
That was terrific, Naomi. Thank you so much. I can see a few people are posting things up. So I love the idea that we could encourage stuff to be like Beyonce. Yeah, I guess, have you had any experiences of working with staff where you've seen people change their minds about how they work with the technology based on, I guess, sparking a particular passion? I'm just thinking about, have you got any concrete examples or things that you've seen, or because I certainly love that idea, and I think based on some of my research, I've seen, found similar things, but it's always nice to kind of hear of examples of that.
One of the things that actually, I did a year-long project with academics trying to teach them to blog. They were, and it's sort of like the reason I didn't come up with these frameworks. These are from a theoretical frameworks within education technology, but I've seen it happen in the blogging sphere. So I was hired to teach staff to blog, but what they wanted was they wanted to use blogging to increase their impact. So they were going to blog as long as the blogging got them more citations. And that was the only reason they wanted to blog, and the whole thing crashed and burned. Nobody wanted to do it. So that's why it was like, so I think what it came down to in the end was the few that did blog. Well, that's interesting you say that, is I don't think that if you provide them with incentives and rewards for blogging, I don't think they're going to do it. You've got to show how a digital tool can actually tap into whatever they're researching, I believe, rather than what they are actually, rather than giving them rewards and impact and those sorts of things. So there was one academic that absolutely hated blogging, like hated it more than anything, but she was somebody who developed methodologies, and she be like Bay, exactly. So she actually ended up using the experience to write an autoethnography of the barriers that technology posed to herself, and exploring that in relation to, and so basically it ended up tapping into her passion for giving her an autoethnographic type instance to explore in order for her to play with the methodology, for her to solve some problems, those sorts of things. So that we ended up, so that's sort of what I mean, is like it ended up being it wasn't the blogging faded into the background. It was the ability for her to play with the idea of blogging and her space, and talking about these sorts of things I've got up there on the screen. Is the only piece of, in a year-long project, it's the only piece of output that came from it, basically, was when blogging wasn't the main idea.
Great, thanks so much, Naomi.
No
just so that we don't run out of time, I might ask people to hold on to any other questions towards the end, and introduce Ariel, who received the introduction right at the start. Ariel Kelly, Academic Manager for New Zealand Tertiary College, who's here to discuss increasing digital literacy for staff and students in preparation for technology-supported teaching and learning. So thank you. Can everybody join with me in thanking Naomi for her presentation while we set up for Ariel's presentation? Great, thank you. Oh, thank you, whoever just changed the slides on me. Great. So thanks, Ariel. Ariel's not only the Academic Manager for New Zealand Tertiary College, but also a Fellow of the New Zealand Association for Educational Administration and Leadership, and is a winner of the New Zealand National Tertiary Teaching Excellence Award. So I might let you continue your introduction, Ariel, so that we don't run out of time. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, sorry, I knew I shouldn't have told you all that because you're going to read it. Hi guys, sorry I was late. I got pesky students, you know what they're like. So what I'm going to share is actually two projects in the end that we were doing. The first one is our digital information literacy project, but I suddenly realized that we actually implemented some of this in a blended learning project as well. And it kind of ties in with the sorts of things that the other two presenters have been talking about. I'll get to those. Okay, so I'll get through these fairly fast. So we tried to define digital information literacy, and that's what we came up with. And that was quite a few years ago now, but that was what it meant then, to be able to access and use and create and share. But what was more interesting was our looking at the capabilities and the dispositions. And we wanted to know if they would experiment or play and go with trial and error when they were finding a new tool that they were using. Now, this is before Twitter, so the tools that they were using were the pretty standard ones. They were the LMS, they were iPads, they were some kind of digital recording of anything. Even a basic camera came into the technology that they hadn't had a chance to play with. Could they be self-directed, and would they consult others about their own ignorance and help each other out? So that was kind of the basis of the research. I think you've had the links to the actual things shared with you, so I can skip over that quite quickly. So what we did was we came up with some taxonomies that we wanted to run by them before and after. So we had the digital information literacy one, but we also had the ICT one. So did they have confidence in their own ability? Could they problem solve? Were they motivated in having persistence, resilience? Were they sharing and collaborating? And we also suggested they set up a personal PI something or other. Would they get on? And we wanted them to do some blogging, essentially. Were they going to be reflective? What were their technical terminology and other things like that and what did they believe about the ICT and whether it would help them in their job? So you can have a look at what we did. Those were the people that were involved. As you can see, we had a couple of TAFEs and we also had a couple of universities. So we had a wide spectrum of people that we were trying to get to take part in being a bit more I guess, experimental with some tools. So those, as I said, they were pretty basic tools. So if it was 2010, you can imagine we're going back a bit when blogging was really quite new. I think Facebook was so new, nobody used it. Nobody had heard of LinkedIn in those days. So they were even the basic ones that we wanted people to use. So what we found, though, and I think this moves forward 7 to 10 years. If they were in an environment that was collaborative and supported, then it worked. So we set up kind of like workshops where they could come along and play with the tool and see what it did, how it worked, get some help. We had a mixed group of lecturers and students in there. The students tended to have better skills than the lecturers did. But the fact that there was somebody there, there was techies there to help them out to improve their skills, they actually made quite a lot of difference to their confidence and what they were able to do. And in that was the fact that they actually met face to face, because we had people who came in using one tool, were going to do this with their time that they had set aside, saw 2 other people using a different one, dropped their tool, went on to do something else. They actually messed about and completely changed what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. So they were exploring and experimenting with things. And the key thing, I think you just mentioned it, Naomi, about play. They were allowed to play. And so they played with each other's toys and they played with new toys because they were exploring and experimenting with it. So what we ended up building there was a fairly tight learning community which spread out into a community of practice because they were helping each other, they were going to each other for mentoring, and they were actually getting a lot further along than they thought they were going to with the tools that they were using. Some of it's there. What we then decided to implement was a blended learning project, which was pull them all out of their faculties, get them together. We actually set up a credit-bearing course that was part of their professional development so that they would get some credit for what they were doing, so there was something in it for them. And we got sanction from the individual academics saying, yes, I'll take part in this because I'll get a piece of paper at the end of it. But the whole faculty was behind it in the sense that, well, this is what we want to achieve. So it was a very clear goal that we were shifting this course into this blended delivery mode, and this is how we're going to do it. And we could then put the carpenters, for example, in with the catering and hospitality people who were completely different animals and were therefore talking about different tools, but their enthusiasm would wear off or on the other people. So we actually got carpenters talking about, well, maybe there's a better way to show this if we did this in an animation, those sorts of things. So the blended learning project was quite large in terms of getting a lot of buy-in from a lot of people, but they were in a position where, again, they could play and experiment and get some technical help. So what we learned from that was that, yeah, some of them couldn't even use Blackboard and couldn't see any point in using Blackboard, so that had to be sensitively dealt with. There was a focus on the outcomes for the student rather than the tool itself. So you can't just say this is a great tool if you don't have a reason for using it. It was project based, so the staff member became a student and they got something out of it. This was a course in their Certificate of Adult Teaching or even a higher course that got them some credit and got them something on their appraisal and got them something for putting towards maybe their CMOT or something that came up later. What we did find though was you get so carried away with the playing and the tool that you really have to understand what are the students getting out of this and what assessment is going to be in line with this. How do you know that they've achieved it? And they got quite carried away. Oh, our vehicle technology students could film what they're doing in the workshop and send it in to us. Okay, how are you going to mark that? How are you going to get it? All that sort of thing you've got to keep track of. What we also found was individual projects were good, but group projects were better, especially if you want to get a real step change in what they do. If you really want them to all heading in the same direction, then you get them to work together and push them, and then they get a bit more impetus that way. They also need that big picture. They have to know where, and some people we discovered don't. They don't know where their little course that they're so wedded to actually fits in terms of the outcomes that the Institute wants for graduates, or even where their little course fits in the whole program in terms of the graduate profile, or where everything fits with where the Institute is heading as well. So that was the kind of basis in a nutshell, because we're running out of time, for those two projects, and we kind of wrote them up. But I've been a staff developer now for about 20 years, and I don't think human nature's changed much. So even though we're talking 7 years ago with some of this stuff, I don't think the lessons should be dismissed really quickly, because I think if you're going to make some change, that's one of the good ways to do it. Okay, so questions? Or comments, or I guess it comes down to, yes, they need to feel the fear, but they need to do it anyway. But one of the ways to get around that fear is to give them some time set aside that is sanctioned to actually play with stuff.
Thank you so much, Ariel. That was terrific. You just mentioned time and having sanctioned time. How important do you think it is to either organise or encourage people to set aside regular habitual time that they've blocked out and have it, you know, dedicated where it's not necessarily, where it's, I guess, a bit more formalised or at least blocked in terms of a calendar so that people are making that time?
Yeah, that was because it was sanctioned by the whole Institute. So they weren't playing, they were actually attending a course or taking part in sanctioned research. So it looked to the bigwigs as though they were actually getting something valuable out of it. But what tended to happen was that they got a chance to play, and people decided, like we had one early childhood teacher, for instance, who wanted to record what her students that she visited out on practicum were doing. She started off with a camera, she ended up with an iPad, and then she found some other way of recording it and sitting down with the student and then deleting it immediately afterwards because of privacy issues. But she wouldn't have made that step change if she hadn't had a chance to get familiar with the technology. But the trick was her manager knew that she was studying something, and it was the way the institute wanted to go, it was the way the department wanted to go.
Great. Sue Tucker asks, how did you get manager, supervisor buy-in for staff to participate?
Well, we set it up as a research project, so they were sanctioned, but we also, as I said, tied it into a professional development qualification. Because when we got to the blended learning project, there was an actual course around it, we carried about 15, 20 credits or something, and they had to produce something at the end that was a product that was marked. So even though they came along to class, they came along every Wednesday from 5 till 9, or I think it was 5 till 8, and we showed them something, but then we gave them something to play with. So because it had a payoff for the institute, they were allowed to.
There's a couple of questions from Caroline and Chia that are sort of semi-related. So Caroline's asking, is the COP still in place? And she's asking, did academics get to share their stories of what didn't work as part of those conversations?
Yeah, well, that was half the fun of playing. What didn't work and why didn't it work? So they were actually confessing their ignorance and laughing at themselves because their confidence grew and they knew they didn't need to know everything. I think a lot of academics won't do something because they think they've got to be an expert in it. But once they're in a position where it's okay to play and it's okay to stuff up and it's okay to make mistakes and the techies won't laugh at you if you don't know how to turn on Blackboard, then that was the safe environment. Did it continue? Don't know. Left. My next project was going to work with the business school to get them doing it, but I left the place, so I have no idea whether it carried on or not. Some of my friends still talk about it, but I don't know if that's actually still happening. I know the qualification is still there, so I hope it still is. It was at a previous institution.
I guess I'll ask one more quick one and just open up to anybody else in the last few minutes. I guess how important, and it can be for everyone as well, I guess how important do you and other people feel it is in terms of tying it to some sort of credit or recognition or partial credit towards something that people can demonstrate or gain qualifications from?
Well, I mean, it was mentioned before, if you the blogging didn't happen because they weren't going to get any output from it. In TAFEs, I think it's a little easier to tie it to something. I guess if they can write it up and publish it, that's fine. There's got to be something in it for them. So if something in it for them turns out to be, I'm a bit more confident with using Twitter, and I can see a reason for it, and I can use it in my classroom, then, and the way I get on with my students, because it meets one of our learning outcomes or it enables something, then there's something in it for them if they want to be a good teacher, I guess. Was the course compulsory? In one department, yes, everybody had to be signed up. In another department, it wasn't, but they came anyway because word spread. And the research, oh yeah, that was fun. I forgot, yeah. The research was they were allowed to choose a tool to the value of something like $300 or something, so it was funded. So they actually got something tangible out of it.
Great. Well, I might just open it up more widely in the last minute or two that we have. If anybody else has any other questions, feel free to take the mic. And thank you so much, Ariel, for presenting to us today.
Ah, you're welcome. I'm sorry I got stuck, but I'm here now.
I guess it's probably more of a comment than a question, and it seems to be a recurring theme across all of the presentations, which is that when we focus on the technology for the sake of having the technology, or for the sake of, you know, sort of integrating with particular systems or whatever, it's pretty apparent that it just doesn't do what people need it to do. So always emphasizing what it is that we're trying to do, you know, putting the technology in the background and just looking at what it is that we're actually trying to do, and then finding what tool will enable us to actually do that seems to be just where we need to go.
I'd agree with that. I think I put something up. You start with a purpose and you go from there. So I think a friend of mine, Richard Elliott, always used to say that it's learning in the driving seat, not technology. That just turns the wheels. And I think he's right. You've got to have a reason for people to actually want to play with this stuff, or for people to actually want to start using it. Like Twitter, for example. Okay, I'll load up. I only tweet if I'm sitting in a conference. That's the only time I've ever turned up on Twitter, because I cannot see why anybody would be interested in anything I've got to say any other time. I can't see a purpose for it. I am on LinkedIn and I am on Facebook, but Twitter, no, I haven't actually got a purpose for it. So, yeah, that's me.
Well, I think it sounds like it's naturally wrapping up. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and all of our presenters. I know that Caroline's just left, but thank you to Naomi and Ariel for presenting today, and thanks everyone for coming. Hopefully you can keep the conversation going through Moodle, and if not through Moodle, there's also Twitter, which despite Ariel just suggesting she doesn't have a purpose, hopefully some of you who do have a purpose are keeping that conversation going through there. Also just look forward to next month. If you have any suggestions for topics or presenters, please post them in the Moodle space. And thanks again, everyone.